Hey there, friends. It's Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. Thanks for being here. This is a missing person segment, and we've got some missing person cases that are quite different. Couldn't be any more different, really. But I'm going to get into that in a minute. I wanted to thank one of the viewers named Carol, who sent in this great hat. Look at Huck, a Huck hat, and it's white like Huck. And just so you know, Huck is a big fishing apparel dealer. I mean, they really make good stuff. Thanks, Carol, and I'll use this. And I took it down and gave it to, put it in front of Huck, and boy, did she find an interest in the white. She sniffed this thing up and down and sideways, so thank you for that. Now, speaking of hats, a couple weeks ago, we had our book release on Missing 411 Washington. Still get the book. It's one of my best. I'm telling you, the stories are weird. And it's about the state of Washington. And in every book I'm going to do from now on, there's going to be an eagle on the front cover. I can guarantee it. And the other thing I'm really proud about, and we've had a huge response, is the hat. At the back of the hat, our website, the front of the hat, an eagle, the word liberty, and on the right side of the cap is the American flag and my son's initials, BP. Ben. Had some comments about why is the flag backwards, Dave? Well, I'm big on symbolism and I'm big on protocol, and I did a bunch of research, and that is the way that you're supposed to wear a flag on a hat. And you can look it up, but it has a lot to do with the military and the way the flag is supposed to be addressed. I may not look right to some, but when I did the research on it, it's the right way to put the flag. Now, what can I tell you? Missing person cases in each state are a little different. Now, when we went over Iowa just recently, some cases where there was water related, cases that were truckers related, and you look at other cases, even though half the state of Colorado is plains, there's very few cases out there in the plains, but there are cases. And when you look at the most recent cases in Colorado, they're the cases we talked about where there were trail runners that disappeared, almost all in one area. So each state sort of has its own personality about missing people. And when you look at a state like California that has a long coastline, has the Sierra Nevada mountains, has the San Joaquin Valley, has quite a varied topography. And then we get to the state of Alaska. I've been to Alaska many times. It's one of my favorite states. I suppose in a different life, I probably would live in Alaska. A few things about Alaska. First of all, it has areas that people have never walked. It's guaranteed. It has more airplane crashes than any other state every year. It has more standing bodies of water than you could ever imagine. And it's got one of the longest coastlines. And the coastlines vary because you've got tons of islands in the south. In the north, you have icy bodies of water. And in the wintertime, it's easy to get across much of Alaska because all the water on the mainland is frozen. So you can get across on snowmobiles, sleds, etc. Now, why are we talking about Alaska? Well, we're talking about Alaska because that's where our first case is going to be. And it's a case you'll never hear about it. Remember a long time ago I told you that states, National Park Service, U.S. Forest Service, they use a term, missing, presumed deceased. Well, once you get that presumed deceased moniker, case isn't on any missing person site anymore. This case isn't on any missing person site that we could find. It involved a man named John Short, 65 years old. But don't let that age fool you. John was in really good shape. Was a generally thin man. Had a lot of endurance. Lived in Alaska for 22 years. And then moved to Florida with his wife, Veronica. And they were living in Cape Coral, Florida. He owned a surveying company, and he had worked in Alaska for those decades as a cadastral engineer. Well, Dave, what's a cadastral engineer? I had to look it up too. And that's essentially a surveyor that defines land boundaries, mine boundaries. He had conducted 90% of all of the surveying work in Seaward Peninsula of Alaska. So this is generally the area that John worked. This is Nome, Qualic, Cape Heisenberg, the Bering Land Bridge National Preserve, the Elam Indian Reservation. This is really wild out here, folks. But that's where he did most of his work. John was a very quiet, super hard-working man. He loved Alaska, but he also loved the variety and the disparity in the environments between Florida and Alaska. He had 2 sons and a daughter. One son was in the military overseas. One daughter lived in Alaska. He worked the majority of the year in Florida. And originally, when he started working in Alaska, his name and his work product got out in the Seaward area, and it kept him working almost all year. Veronica enjoyed the Florida weather and predominantly stayed in Florida when John would travel in the summer months at times to go and do the work in Seaward. John was a longtime resident in Alaska, over 2 decades. He knew the dangers better than anybody because surveyors oftentimes work alone in the middle of nowhere. Nobody's watching your back. He knew. Well, in June '76, he was asked to do boundary surveying work at a place called the Candle Mine. There was no radio at the mine. There was no phone at the mine. And there was no way to tell people at the mine that you were coming. But it had been arranged that John was going to come up during that summer of '76 in the early part, get in there and spend up to a month doing surveying work. Well, John had a work partner there named Steve Miskoff. He was a business partner in Fairbanks. Well, John and Steve had talked about this work. Steve knew John was going in. And locals at the point where the trailhead starts to go into this mine said that John was carrying about 10 to 12 pounds in his backpack. Shouldn't be any more than a 2 to 4 day hike. But the thing is that you could do it in probably 2 straight days if you wanted to, because it was sunny 24/7 at this time of the year up there. It was a fairly easy hike, nothing rough, nothing hard. And he was going to stay between 2 and 4 weeks, depending on how much work he had to do. Now you think, a man 65 years old, doing this alone, crazy, right? Well, I thought about that, but the man had lived there for 2 decades. He knew this peninsula like you know your city. His partner and his wife both stated that any idea that John got lost would be ridiculous. He never got lost. He had a certain uncanniness about him to know the area, know the threats. He took bear spray with him, but he never carried a gun. But he took off. Locals saw him take off down the trail. And again, there was no way to tell the mine that he was coming. And this was June 15th, 76. End of July 1976. John hadn't come out. Miskoff was getting a little concerned. He called people in the city at the trailhead and he said, "Hey, the next person that comes out of the mine, could you have them contact me?" He said, "Sure." About a week later, a guy comes out of the mine, calls Miskoff, says, "Hey, how's John? Do you know when he's coming out?" And they said, "John who?" "John Short, the surveyor." "Oh yeah, we gave up on him ever coming. He was supposed to be there in June, but he never arrived." Miskoff says, "What do you mean he never arrived?" "No, he never arrived." Now remember this. It's about 5 or 6 weeks after John would have left. He never would have thought of canceling. It was on his calendar. Everyone knew he was going. He called Miskoff. Miskoff knew he was leaving. People at the trailhead saw him leaving. Well, it wasn't until August 1st that Veronica even found out her husband was missing. And now it had been a month and a half, almost 2 months. She calls the Alaska State Troopers. Troopers state that they'd go out and they'd start searching. Now this area, not an easy area to get to. It would be hard to get anyone that far north to do an extensive search. There are no big cities, so there's no big search and rescue teams. So the troopers decide to search by plane, by auto where they can, and then use sled dogs the rest of the time. Well, they searched for 6 weeks. Veronica was upset. She said, "Come on, you guys got to walk that trail. What if he broke his leg and he can't move around? He's down in the gully or something." Well, they weren't getting any of that, and they weren't accepting any of that. There was still 24 hours of sunlight. Make a long story short, Veronica ended up suing the state troopers because she didn't think that they did a thorough job. And at the end of 6 weeks, they gave up the search. Nothing of John was ever found. Now, John matches the profile to me of many people who have disappeared, who I seriously question whether they should have or would have. Super smart man, in super good shape. Older man, Caucasian. Got along with everybody. It's that profile that scares me. I mean, just gone from the face of the earth. Boom! Nothing. Never found his backpack, never found anything. Any of his surveying tools, things would last forever. Where'd he go? Exactly. Now, in 1976, they did have personal locator beacons. They were expensive, but they did have them. And John wasn't carrying one. Don't believe they had sat phones then. Now, nowadays, every remote mining camp has a sat phone. So you could call, leave a message, and they could pick up a message and call you back. Alaska's dangerous. Very dangerous. Wet. You can be walking through a bog in Alaska. It looks like ground. One step, boom, you're up to your neck in water. That's if you got off the trail. I don't see John getting off the trail. Now, weather. Weather can change quickly up in Alaska. Predators. There's predators at every turn in Alaska. And they will consume you. Would there be one chance in 1,000 Dave would make a hike in any area of Alaska without a gun? There's not one chance in 1,000. No. I'm sorry. That's not happening. And that's not any slam on John. It's just me. So, John Short, 65 years old, missing in Alaska, never found. Good, very nice, hardworking man. Now, I told you that these stories were going to be as different as night and day. And they are. I've talked to you a lot about missing 411, a sobering coincidence. Water-related deaths. That's what this is. It involves a man named Jack Chisholm, 21 years old. The incident happened June 9th, 2023. Pretty recent. If you look up the case, you'll be able to see his photo. I didn't want to, it'd be a copyright violation for me to take these because there was only a few that I found. He was a student at Newcastle University in the UK. Stop. He was a biology student at Castle University in the UK. Smart young man. Very good shape. Absolute 100% profile hit for what I've worked up in the past. Right there. His residence, he lived with his folks in Burford, Oxfordshire. He had friends in the States, and they had all agreed that he'd come out for 30 days, and he'd work at a turtle sanctuary in Florida. Now that's something I'd like to do. That'd be pretty cool. He was staying at a friend's home in Bucalea Island, Florida. Bucalea Island, Florida. Where's that? Well, son of a gun, that's right on the ocean. Here's Bucalea Island. There's the ocean. You couldn't get any closer to the ocean. Here's Fort Myers, Cape Coral. Remember, we were just talking about Cape Coral in the previous case. Isn't that a coincidence? So you got it, right? Now, where he lived, because I believe people live in areas of importance. Here's London. His home is right about in here, kind of in the country. There's the ocean. There's Bath, Swindon, Oxford, UK. Okay? I know some of you say, well, Dave, 70% of the world is water. Well, good, brilliant. Yeah. I'm sorry. If you had read my books and you do not see the correlation to water with many of these cases, I can't help you. You should probably just move along because you probably think I'm an idiot. But hang with me on this case. On June 9th, first of all, Jack arrived June 4th. He'd been working there a few days. People loved him. He was upbeat, healthy, Smart. On June 9th, they had the day off. At 1:30, the two people, a lady and another guy that lived there, said that they had to go into town, do some things. They'd be back later that afternoon. Jack says, yeah, I'll just want to stay, relax, take a nap, sun, hang out by the pool. They said, great. So friends left. 6 p.m., they come back. They arrive at the house. They can't find Jack. They search the house, search the bedroom, start searching the yard. As they get to the yard, they look in the pool. His body's at the bottom of the pool. One of the females jumps in the pool, drags him out, starts CPR, calls paramedics. Paramedics get there. They start working on him. At 6:39 p.m., he's described as deceased. Sheriffs respond. The homeowners stated that they had seen Jack in the pool before. He was a super strong swimmer, which added to the weirdness of this case. They also described him as a very happy person, excited to be in Florida. He was having fun. He was doing exactly what he wanted to do. Well, the sheriffs put all this information in their report, and then they forwarded that to the county coroner, who took the body the next day. Coroner read the report and noted the first thing. What? The pool was 4 foot deep. Jack was almost 6 feet tall. In perfect health. Coroner started to examine the body. Stated that they only found a slight hemorrhage to his left trapezius muscle and a slight abrasion to his left eye. All were described as extremely minor issues, and that it was their belief there was no third party involvement. Well, Jack's mom and dad requested that the body be flown to the UK, and after the autopsy, after the inquest, after the sheriff's report, put a body on the plane and returned it to Martin and Tanya Chisholm. The coroner made it a point in his press releases to say that Jack was very fit and he could find no medical issues. Then the coroner said something that I pay attention to. Coroners are very careful people. They don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to be taken to task. They don't want to be looked at like an idiot. Quote, the coroner described this incident as inexplicable. There was no reason Jack couldn't get himself out of the pool. Giddy up. I'm sorry, folks. I know too much. I do. This is a completely sad case. Because if you've read Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence, you know the cornerstone of these cases is GHB. There's no drugs in Jack's system. He hadn't gone to a bar. He didn't have any way to move to get away from the house. He didn't have any transportation. He stayed at the home. Coroners do not test for GHB. They test for 24 drugs. And GHB is not on that list. And in my book, I stated that parents of kids just like Jack, looking for answer, did second autopsies and then paid for a scan of their blood and urine for 200 different types of drugs. And that's how GHB got identified. Now, the body does produce GHB in minute quantities, really small. And I've talked to people in this world, even coroners, and I said, what if there was some way to turn that spigot on? I mean, really, turn it on so that the body produced massive amounts of GHB. Now, GHB is one of those drugs that the body gets rid of very quickly. Well, in those second autopsies, they found GHB in massive amounts. Amounts that don't even make sense. Now, some of you wanted to argue, but I've talked to too many coroners and too many medical doctors who say that GHBs in the right quantity make you almost comatose. You'll know what's happening around you, but you won't be able to react. That'd be a horrible way to die. So it looks, if someone somewhere puts you in a body of water, it would appear like you just drowned. But in reality, you were murdered somehow. And I have no idea how. Now, many of these cases over the years are predominantly ignored because they can't be wrapped in a neat bow. And few people have accumulated the number of these cases like I have to show that it may be a little more common than people think. Now, Jack was a white male adult, healthy, young, smart, athletic. Ka-ching, there's the profile. No obvious signs of injury. Ka-ching. No foul play. Ka-ching. No obvious reason why he couldn't have gotten himself out of the water. Ka-ching. Now, what's really interesting is there have been a series of deaths called the Manchester Canal cases in the UK. Now, those cases, many of the canals are not that deep. They're like the pool that Jack was in, maybe 4 feet deep. All you had to do was stand up. You wouldn't drown. But these people all drowned. How is that? Some people have said that there's a Manchester Canal pusher, even though nobody's ever seen anyone get pushed in. They're all scratching for some rational explanation to an irrational death. So, those are the two cases for today. John Short, 65, June 15th, 1976, Alaska. Jack Chisholm disappeared almost in John Short's backyard. Kind of weird, huh? Bukelia Island, Florida. I want Mr. and Mrs. Chisholm to know I feel very sorry for the loss of their son. He's a smart, good soul. Appreciate you guys being here. Remember, if you want to buy the book or the hat, you go to our website, NA, like North America, nabigfootsearch.com. Go to the online store and get the stuff there. I appreciate you being here. Paulides out.